In the 8th century, the Chinese invented gunpowder, and warfare has never been the same. Gunpowder was first used for fireworks, but eventually it made its way to the battlefield. First as a fire lance, and then as a hand cannon. By the 10th century, the Song dynasty had many weapons utilizing gunpowder. Gunpowder and cannon made their way west and were used in the siege of Constantinople in 1204. Some of the cannon were extremely large and required 16 teams of oxen to move them. The most common projectile was a ball carved of stone. The Moors brought the cannon to Spain and Portugal in their conquests of the Iberian Peninsula. The Moors and Spanish both used cannon in the siege of Seville, Spain in 1247. The English fired on the Scots in 1327 with cannon, and both the English and French used cannon in the Battle of Orleans in 1429. Early cannon were quite simple. A cast metal tube, usually of bronze or cheaper iron, closed on one end with a vent hole. Loops aided in moving the heavy guns, which usually were mounted in a wooden cradle, which had a method for adjusting the elevations. Sometimes they would blow up due to casting defects or poor quality gunpowder. Breech-loading cannon were developed but were not very successful. Gas leaked to run the breech lock. Wheels were added to the wooden carriages for mobility, and the wooden carriages soon gave way to iron ones. Cannon were designed for special purposes, such as garrison guns or field pieces. These garrison cannon overlooked the city of Edinbrough, Scotland. All cannon have the same basic parts: the muzzle from which the projectile is shot, the barrel, and the breech where the powder, wadding, and projectile are loaded prior to firing. Cannon are loaded with gunpowder, normally in a bag, wadding, and some kind of projectile. Early cannon used stones or arrows, and later cannon used cannonballs and shells. Wadding creates a gas-tight seal between the powder and the projectile. Cannon like this howitzer from the American Revolution had large wheels for mobility, but on some occasions other means of transport were necessary. To fire the 18th century cannon, first you had to clean out the vent. This is where the priming powder will go. Sponge out the barrel to ensure that there are no sparks that can cause pre-ignition of the new powder charge. Then load the powder, usually in a tightly packed bag. Load the projectile, a cannonball, a shell, and wadding. Ram down the projectile, wadding, and powder. Add primer powder to the vent. Aim the cannon. Fire by igniting the primer powder. The greatest mobile platform for cannon was the warship, under either sail or steam. Sailing ships of the 17th, 18th, and mid-19th centuries were armed with many cannon. Nelson's warship, HMS Victory, had over 100 cannon at the Battle of Trafalgar. His guns were equipped with this gunlock. Fine powder is poured into the split quill, then it is closed up and inserted to the vent hole of the cannon and cocked. The gun is fired by pulling the lanyard. Cannon could be fired faster and with greater accuracy with this gun lock. Later guns would be equipped with percussion locks. Bronze cannon were often beautifully detailed, like this howitzer. It has a screw for adjusting elevation, and note the rifled barrel. Rifling caused the projectile to spin, and that spin increased accuracy and distance. Cast iron cannon were used in the American Revolution and the American Civil War, with constant improvements in design, metallurgy, and gunpowder. The muzzle-loaded cannon reached its zenith in the mid-1800s. These big guns of the 1860s could propel a 300-pound projectile 5 miles. This gun can pivot nearly 180 degrees. The elevation is adjustable with this screw. The cannon is rolled forward when loaded. Upon firing, it recoils to the rear position. These columbades are called soda bottle guns because of their shape. The addition of more iron in the breech area allows for greater powder charges without the risk of the cannon blowing up. This is a 7-inch triple-banded Brook rifle, range 7,920 yards. This is an 8-inch Parrott rifle. It fires a 200-pound projectile, 8,000 yards. This banded 10-inch Parrott rifle fires a 300-pound projectile. The banding provides extra strength in the breech area of the gun. These cannon fired quite a variety of projectiles. Some were simple cannonballs and some others were exploding shells. Some carried grape shot and some shrapnel. Here's a typical arrangement. These massive guns required a crew of 7 men to operate them. At 55,000 pounds, they were extremely heavy, difficult to move, and required at least 6 horses. This banded Rodman gun can pivot 360 degrees. Notice how elevation is adjusted with a ratchet mechanism. Powder in these guns is ignited using a friction igniter. Innovation in gun design continued through the latter half of the 19th century. The last muzzle-loaded cannon were used by the French during the Franco-Prussian War of 1870 to 1873. But the Prussians used the new breech-loading guns. In the early 20th century, the term cannon seemed to be replaced by the term artillery, and big guns were breech-loaded with projectile, powder, and primer contained in a single cartridge. But some of the very large guns retained separate powder and projectile during World War II. In this 1950s vintage 280mm gun, the powder and projectile are separate. It was designed primarily to deliver a nuclear projectile. Here we see all the functions performed manually. The projectile is loaded. TNT charges are packed behind it. The breech is closed. The fuse is inserted. The final aiming. And the lanyard is pulled. As in the days of sail, there's no better mobile platform for big guns than a ship. These are the 16-inch guns of the Battleship New Jersey. It will fire this 2,000-pound projectile approximately 20 miles. The projectile from below decks is loaded into the gun. The gun is loaded with 600 pounds of black powder. The last bag contains the primer. Breech is closed and the gun is ready to fire.